Game over, man. Game over.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
So serious.
I am Iron Man.
This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the InSession Film Podcast.
Welcome to episode 596 for August 5th, 2024, and I'm JD Duran.
And I'm Brendan Cassidy.
Hey, thanks for joining us, everybody. Happy birthday to me, as I am turning 39 tomorrow as this episode is released.
Oh my gosh, happy birthday, man. I can't believe you're so close to 40. So close,
I know,
man.
It's crazy.
This is 40. I'm 40.
Ancient. Yes. I am very old, but
we all know that 40 is the new 39, as you just proved right there.
Yeah. I recently got off of the M. Night Shyamalan beach, so as you can tell, I am very old. That's the wrong M. Night movie, though.
Is it the reversal of that old beach? Because you might be turning 39, close to 40. You still look 17 to me.
Somehow. Yeah. I don't know. It's just good genes, I guess. I don't really do anything all that special or unique. I haven't had any of the surgeries.
You know, I often wonder about that. At least it is with me. I wonder if this is the same case for everyone, because I think back on my friends that I knew in high school, and I see them now, even in my mid-30s, as all of us are. They still look the same to me, like I remember them from, let's say, 4th or 5th grade. And so to me, they still look quote unquote young, even though I know that technically they don't. Like, is that sort of a common occurrence with many people? Because you grew up with them, you have this like preconceived notion of what they used to look like.
Yeah, no, I think that is exactly right. My brother and his family just came down to South Florida to visit us over the weekend. And I haven't seen my brother in quite a few years. They live in Indiana. The rest of my family's still in the Midwest.
Sure.
So I haven't seen them in a few years, but every time I see my brother, even though he's taller than me, he's bigger than me, he is 4 years younger. So even though he's in his mid-30s, I still see him as if he's 12. Like, he still looks like he's 12 years old to me. I don't know how else to explain it. It is a little weird. You're definitely onto something there. I don't know what it is psychologically that makes us hone in on the younger versions of the people we know. But
it's the inside out thing, because we tend to have our core memories with a lot of these people.
Yes.
And I think that's part of it too. I mean, I don't know about you, but a lot of my core memories were formed when I was in that range between late elementary school into high school, at least as far as my childhood core memories are concerned. And I went to a small high school, so a lot of the people I knew at that time were a lot of the same people in that entire time span. So I'm always associating the way that they look with how I first met them, which was sometimes when we were 11 years old. And that's how I always see them. It's a weird thing. I'd love to talk to someone that's professionally maybe more, I guess, credible and talking about whatever that thing is. It's really interesting.
It is very interesting. I very much do agree. You have that certain perspective on those close to you, and that's how you always see them. I'm going to be real interested to see how that is with my kids as I get older as well. At any rate, I am feeling older. I am close to 40, but I'm still upright. That's what's most important, I guess.
Hey, you're still playing hockey. I think most people who are at your age can't even say that they're doing a 3-minute jog. So let's just say you're doing something right.
Yeah, like I got the skates. I can still go. I might be slow out there comparatively to everyone else, but hey, I'm still out there competing.
You're still rocking.
I want to urge everyone to go and check out last week's episode if you haven't already, episode 595.
Yeah, that was fun.
If you missed it, we brought back the great Jay Ledbetter, and we did not tell him what the topic was going to be, or the main reason we were bringing him back. It was a complete surprise. He had no idea. But of course, for those anyway that have listened to that episode, as many people did over the last few weeks and in the last month, I went back to revisit Michael Mann's Miami Vice. We did a show, myself, Brendan, and Jay, some years ago during our Michael Mann movie series. We talked about Miami Vice. It ended up being this infamous conversation where Jay and I got into it a little bit on that movie. It was a little awkward and weird, at least for us.
Them fighting words for sure.
Yes. As I've noted in the last few weeks, I did go back and re-listen to that episode. And when you remove yourself from it a little bit, I don't think it's quite as egregious as we remembered it to be, but it became this interesting thing, at least with us here internally. And so it's something we've always joked about. And so when I revisited the film, I ended up liking it a lot more than I did that first time around. And I wanted to talk to him about it. I thought it would have been interesting to hear his perspective on all of that as well. So we had a great conversation.
Proper, more diplomatic setting this time around. But then, the timing was certainly appropriate too, given the fact that, all movies, especially ones that were mixed and not well received at the time of their release, tend to go through a certain resurgence sometimes. Not all, but some do. We're going to talk about a filmmaker on this episode who has had a few of those, to say the least. But a movie like Miami Vice is one of those examples, and it was top of mind all over film Twitter for the past few weeks, which sort of sparked that reason for us to go back and revisit it and talk about it again. Thank you to our good friend Brandon Streisnig for basically starting that resurgence, or at least bringing the conversation back to the forefront.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was a really fun conversation. I definitely urge everyone to go and check that out, especially if you listen to, or at the very least are aware of, that initial review between myself, Brendan, and Jay.
Yeah.
You want to go and check out last week's episode. It was a really great time.
It was a lot of fun.
Little redemption. Also want to note here up front that our 2000 retrospective is coming up very soon as well.
Yeah.
In just a few weeks, episode 599, in fact, we are going to be doing our retrospective for the year 2000. We do this every single year. Brendan and I will pick a film from that year to review. Yeah. We'll give our top 10 movies of that year. It's really fun. And then you'll also want to stay tuned to episode 600, where, because we've now done that entire decade, we are going to be doing the best of the 2000s, which we did a few years ago in 2020. Yep. We did best of the decade for the 2010s.
Yep.
It'll be very similar to that episode if you want to go and check that out as a precursor. And that's also going to be a lot of fun. So you'll want to stay tuned for all of that.
How awesome that the timing just worked out so nicely that we can do some type of celebratory film episode on episode 600. Yeah. I think that is that was meant to be, my friend.
Yeah, it's fantastic, and how it worked out. Although we had to manipulate it a little bit with me going on vacation to make it work.
Yeah. Well, then me going on vacation as well, I think kind of weirdly helped as well, because I'll be going on vacation at the end of this month, and I think that sort of pushed things a little bit. So we got some nice play there. I think it worked out nicely.
Yeah. So that's on the horizon. I very much look forward to that. So make some are subscribed either to the YouTube channel here or Apple Podcasts, Spotify, however you listen.
Lots to talk about.
It might be the dog days of summer, and look, for the summer movie season, this is usually a dumping ground, but we have found something very interesting to take hold in August. So it's going to be great. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Looking forward to it.
We are going to be talking about M. Night Shyamalan on this episode. We're going to be doing a ranking, a collective ranking. We've done this for a couple of filmmakers previously. We're going to be doing that in the back half of the episode, with Trap, of course, getting its release over the weekend. And we'll have a review for that coming soon as well. So be on the lookout for that. Before we get to M. Night, though, we will continue the theme of this summer, is the parade on or off, which we kind of skipped last week, partially because I wanted to get to the surprise for Jay. I didn't want to waste any time. We jumped right into it. So we skipped that last week. I don't know if Jay would have been interested in having that conversation anyway.
Yeah, probably not.
Especially because it's Deadpool and Wolverine. Although, ironically, I think he liked it more than we did. Certainly
Which
more
is
than
so
I did.
weird. That's
Yeah,
so weird.
very strange. But yes, Deadpool and Wolverine smashing box office records last week.
Yeah.
As of its second weekend, it is now up to $824 million worldwide. It is well on its way to $1 billion, and has trumped Passion of the Christ as far as best. Is it best opening or best all time, right? For R-rated movie.
It is the highest grossing R-rated movie of all time domestically. So it's that it's holding that domestic title. As far as I remember, it is still in the top 5 as far as highest R-rated movies worldwide. But I think it's sitting at number 3. So the sad thing here is, from what I understand, it now being the highest grossing R-rated movie domestically means it had to knock something off. And sadly, that film that got bumped off was Oppenheimer.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
Oppenheimer is apparently still holding strong at number 2 for worldwide, but we'll see what happens next week.
See what
because,
happens.
of course, this is still only Deadpool and Wolverine's second week. It has nowhere to go but up. And it's probably going to keep going up.
And as we noted, it is August. It has very little to compete with for the next month, perhaps.
I think it needs to make like around another 150 million worldwide in order to beat Oppenheimer for the number 2 highest grossing R-rated movie worldwide, which it's going to do. Like, there's no question it's going to do that.
Yeah, and other than Alien Romulus, that should hopefully do well. Despite my reservations on the film, I do want that film to be great, and I hope that it does well at the box office as well.
Same here.
Aside from that, I don't know if the film has anything to compete with.
Well,
until September 6th, when Beetlejuice comes out, that might be its biggest competition up until then. But the next few weeks, it's Deadpool and Wolverine. I don't.
Deadpool and Wolverine, it certainly helped being released when it did, because it now has a good chance of being the highest grossing movie of the summer. And a lot of people were thinking that's going to be Inside Out 2. Will it, though? I mean, this is where it gets interesting, because Inside Out 2, from what I understand, let me look at some of the notes that I took on this. It is now in the top 10 highest grossing movies of all time, not adjusted for inflation. It is sitting at number 10, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's crazy.
That's crazy. That's Inside Out 2. So the fact that Deadpool and Wolverine might still hit that point, because it's only in week 2 and it has nothing to compete with in most of August outside of Alien Romulus, as you said, that is pretty strange.
Crazy.
That's pretty intense. I'm not going to say movies are back, but we are seeing a little bit of a recovery mode, which is at least nice to see.
And it's fascinating when you compare it to May, when we were all like, "Oh my God, it's over! It's been a great run."
See, no,
it's
like movies like this, especially a movie like Deadpool and Wolverine. It's why I'm at least trying to get away from the whole, as a critic, do I recommend something or do I not? Because I'm at a point now where I just want movies to do well. That even if I don't love the movie, I'm glad people are seeing it.
You just want the industry to thrive. Yeah.
Now, I mean, there's another conversation to be had that because we're getting all these big movies doing so well, some of these movies are trickling into smaller theaters, which is limiting the potential for smaller art house films that we also like to see. So maybe there's maybe lacking of diversity, but even so, that's a different conversation, I feel like, than what we're having here. At the very least, movies are doing well.
Movies are doing well, and the double-edged sword here is, and this somewhat circles back to our conversation last week on the Marvel news at D23 and Robert Downey Jr. coming back. I was talking to our great friend Ryan McQuaid offline, and he mentioned this. I hope he doesn't mind me bringing it up here. I assume that he brought it up on the Awards Watch podcast, but the thing that is concerning that we didn't even talk about last week is, RDJ coming back to Marvel, and obviously they're desperate. They're having their own crisis there. Yeah. But what does it say about the industry that RDJ, he moves away from the MCU? wins an Oscar, but is still drawn to this. And obviously part of it is the money. They're giving him dump trucks of cash to do this. In fact, it is absurd. That's a whole nother talking point we could get into as well. The fact that Marvel is shoveling out all this money for 3 people, yet somehow they can't find a way to pay their other artists. Or the people that just got laid off last week. And the timing of that was certainly all of those people laid off. They can't pay VFX artists on time or what they're worth. It is insane that they're paying those 3 individuals that amount of money, but somehow, the well is dry though. We can't pay everybody. We don't have the money. We've got losses, Brendan.
The
what
money
do you want
for
me to do? We have losses.
I forget who it was that pointed this out on Twitter, but someone apparently said that the budget now for these Avengers movies, just for these 3 people, those 3 people being Robert Downey Jr., Joe Russo, and Anthony Russo, their salaries are apparently even more than the budget of the creator from last year.
That's
crazy. Pretty insane. Yeah,
it's absolutely insane. But my point in that, to circle back to the conversation I had with Ryan, between the success of Deadpool and Wolverine, the success of Inside Out 2, and RDJ coming back into the fold, it could signal to the rest of Hollywood that, hey, we're going to take this nostalgia thing to a whole new level. And this is all we're going to get moving forward, which I hope isn't the case. But I do think Ryan makes a great point by saying that. And it's hard not to be cynical when you look at it from that perspective. And I do wholeheartedly agree with what Ryan was saying there, that things are going to escalate to
they are
an even new stratosphere. And we're already bombarded, overwhelmed with sequels and remakes and reboots. That's mostly all we get anyway. And now with the success of all of these movies, maybe that's all we're going to get. I mean, when you look at, let's just go ahead, Brennan, and let's look at the top 10 movies, the highest grossing movies of this year. So you get Inside Out 2, a sequel. Now, and that one is a little interesting, going back to our conversation, May. Like, things were so bleak then, even though it's Pixar. But Pixar, up until Inside Out 2, had somewhat struggled post-pandemic.
They somewhat struggled. I think that one was a bit of a surprise for a lot of people.
It's just funny in hindsight, because back in May, I was like, I don't know about Inside Out 2. I know the first one did great, but Pixar is desperate for a win. They've been struggling. Right now, the box office seems like we're never going to have a successful movie ever again. Like, that's what it felt like at the time. And then lo and behold, $1.5 billion later, there's Inside Out 2. At any rate, a sequel, Deadpool and Wolverine, as you noted earlier, is part of the MCU and the third film of the Deadpool movies. Then you get Despicable Me 4.
Yeah.
Dune Part 2. Okay, that is, I guess, a sequel, but it's Villeneuve, it's Dune. Maybe that doesn't count.
It's so close
it's
to
part of a.
Yeah. I mean, it's existing IP because it is a classic sci-fi story that people are at least aware of. But I mean, the first Dune that it's canonically tied to was only a few years old at that time. So
absolutely. And that might be our best case scenario moving forward. I'll circle back to that here in a second. But at number 5, Godzilla X Kong. Okay.
Yeah.
6, Kung Fu Panda. 4, the fourth of those movies.
Yep.
Bad Boy Ride or Die, the fourth of that franchise. But look,
lots of fours.
That's a franchise. I'll take 100 Bad Boys movies. I'm okay with that.
I'll take a crossover with anyone on that one.
Yes, but you're right. A lot of 4s here.
Yeah.
And then at 8, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. At number 9, Twisters. Again, legacy sequel there.
Yeah.
And A Quiet Place Day 1, which I'll talk about here in a moment.
Yeah.
At number 10. So those are our 10 movies. And the only one that seems to have a singular vision of that is Dune Part 2. But you are right. It is existing IP. There's the book. There's the previous movie. And there's, of course, the first Dune from 2020.
Yeah.
So it's not as if it's coming in completely on its own terms. It's not.
Yeah.
But of that 10, it seems to be the one that is artistically a little bit more distinctive than the rest of them.
Yeah.
But maybe that's, to Ryan's point, maybe that's the workaround moving forward. If everything's going to be IP and everything has to be nostalgia, filmmakers will have to take something like a Dune and make something out of
make it
that.
into their own, which we like to see. At least we like to see at least a creator imbuing something like that and making their own film out of it, which is something Marvel used to do, at least with Phase 1 and most of Phase 2 and even Phase 3, right? Those compromising visions were not really as par for the course as they were back in the day. And Dune Part 2's success is probably the closest that this year is mirroring to, let's say, the quality of success with movies like Oppenheimer and Barbie last year.
Yeah.
I'd say that's the closest example there. Given Ryan's point, I think he makes a lot of great points for sure. It also suggests something we've talked about a lot, given the news of Disney basically buying everyone over the past, decades? So like we're seeing this monopolization of the film industry. Because when you also look at now the top 10 highest grossing movies of all time worldwide, as we talked about Inside Out 2 now being at number 10, most of these movies now, after Disney acquiring Fox and many of these other properties there, most of these are now Disney-owned properties. Avatar, technically, those are Disney-owned properties. So we're seeing more of those, to the point that it almost seems as if when you're not doing a Disney movie, you're doing something else. It's like you're Disney or something else. You have these two avenues of filmmaking nowadays. And that's a scary thought to me, that there's just no... you basically have a fork in the road and two paths. Right? It's like a Robert Frost poem. It's basically what Hollywood is becoming. And that's a scary thought.
Well, and that's why I find myself, as I'm sure many cinephiles and critics are, rooting for, at least financially, what we're seeing with something like Longlegs or even Civil War, like the A24 and the Neons of the world, that are willing to take these artistic risks. And a lot of their movies are never going to make money. They know that up front. But you get the success of Longlegs, you get the success of something like Civil War on A24's side, and it gives those studios resources to be able to take more risk with other filmmakers and stories that are great counter programming to everything I just laid out in that top 10. So that is, like I didn't love Longlegs. I didn't love Civil War. But you want to see movies like that
money,
do well.
Though. Yeah, me too. I will say, as far as bigger movies are concerned from this year, while it is technically a legacy sequel, I would have loved to see Twisters do a little bit better than it is. And primarily because even though it is tied to an existing movie that many of us, at least those of our age group, grew up with, that first Twister from 1996, the movie still felt like its own original thing, despite the nostalgic tie in there. And it's one of those weird cases where apparently the movie is doing very well domestically, but it's not doing well internationally.
Yeah, that's interesting, right? Yeah. And I wonder if it's because tornadoes are such a North American event. They just don't happen.
Well, even the marketing for
around the world all that much.
Yeah, well, the marketing for the movie was very middle America. Like that was its targeted group. Yeah. And not even the marketing, the movie itself feels very middle America, which is something I admire about the film. I love that it does feel very Oklahoma. And maybe that relatability that you're talking about overseas is just not there, which makes the movie kind of like this weird simultaneous hit and a miss at the same time. Which
it's a little weird. Yeah, because at $195 million domestically, you would think that, especially when you look at something like Inside Out and Deadpool, where the worldwide is triple what the domestic is, or it becomes tripled at that point. So like by that math, Twister should be making around like 600 million, 650 million.
Yeah.
if it had the same trajectory as Inside Out and Deadpool 2, and Despicable Me 4, but somehow it hasn't. It just has not registered with the overseas market.
It's unfortunate. And I didn't
Yeah.
love the movie, but again, like that maybe goes back to your example of something like Doom Part 2, that while there is an IP tie to it, it still feels like it feels a little more disconnected than the sequelitis of these other movies, right? And I'd love to see a movie like that do well, because it's the closest that some of these movies that we've gotten this summer are to being an original film. And it has a great director tied to it that we love with movies like Minari, and we want to see that do well. And I didn't love the film, but I still want to see the movie do well. And it's just weird to see a movie being like be in that middle ground of being a hit here but not there. It's just a weird thing.
It is. And I had never really thought about it in that perspective. But yeah, all of these other films, there is a broadness in terms of global demographic, where Twisters is very Central America, like
it is
United States of America specifically.
Yeah.
And I could see how that would not register with the rest of the world. I could understand someone in Spain going, it's not for me. Like, I'm not going to go see Twisters. Okay.
I think the movie Twisters, I think it comes out on VOD next week as we're recording this, the 13th of August, which means it's probably not going to make enough of its money back to be deemed an overall hit. It's kind of unfortunate.
It is. Yeah, that's pretty wild. I guess I will use this as a transition. We don't necessarily have to stop the whole box office conversation here, because I do think there's more to talk about. But since we're already here and A Quiet Place Day One is sitting there at number 10 at $258 million worldwide, which again isn't crazy. That's not crazy money. But its budget was only $67 million. That is far less than something like Twisters, which I think had a $150 million budget. I think what's interesting about A Quiet Place Day One, I'm coming to this party very late, obviously.
Oh, yeah. You just saw it. Yeah.
I just saw this last week because I had COVID when it came out. So I was not able to get to the theater to see it.
Yeah.
But I am completely bought in on Michael Sarnowski. Completely bought in.
Yeah, you like this guy. I loved Pig. I really did.
I loved Pig. I loved A Quiet Place Day One. It is beautiful. I think it's really poignant. It is full of these striking character moments that I really love. I don't know how he convinced a major studio to greenlight this movie. He made a $67 million summer movie about trying to get a slice of pizza as aliens attack Earth. That is insane.
I wonder, like when you describe it that way, I wonder if it's a similar thing as remember 10 Cloverfield Lane from some years ago that Dan Trachtenberg probably had this great thriller idea, and then the studios realized, wait, we can morph this into a Cloverfield film.
Yeah.
Because
it's a little bit like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And this is weird to say because I don't really say this as a knock on A Quiet Place Day One, but the whole Quiet Place world building that we know from this franchise, it almost feels like it feels irrelevant in a way. But I think in a way that is the movie's point. Michael Sarnowski was very much deliberately deconstructing genre tropes with Pig. He was trying to lead you to think, oh, this is a revenge thriller. And it is, but not in the John Wick kind of way that it seems to trick you into thinking. So in a weird way, A Quiet Place Day One is, you think this is actually a Quiet Place film? Not really. So I kind of like that sleight of hand.
You could replace the aliens with anything and it plays out the same. However, him taking on the Quiet Place lore, I think is perfect for him and his style of filmmaking.
That's fair.
Because yes, he does condense it down to, hey, we're just going to get a slice of pizza. That is literally the plot of this movie.
Yeah, it's an amazing idea. It really
is incredible. And as a result, there's very little spectacle in this movie. In fact, all of the spectacle is in the trailers because that's all they had. There are maybe 2, you could argue 3 scenes of spectacle in this film. It is mostly concerned with two characters quietly, of course, finding purpose in life through each other. Again, utilizing these incredible moments of character and emotion that I just found absolutely gorgeous to watch. It is breathtaking. I was emotionally quite moved, especially thanks to Alexis Gapsis's sensational score. It is one of my favorites of the entire year.
That is an underrated component of the film. You're right.
It is so good. Lupita Nyong'o also excellent. She's very, very good here. Joseph Quinn, I liked. Alex Wolff, almost unrecognizable Alex Wolff in those opening scenes.
Yeah, kind of is.
He hides behind that beard in a really great way.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
Fantastic. So yeah, like I just love that the film is so simple. There's a great simplicity to it, and and there's something endearing. It's very New York. I just want to go get a slice of New York pizza. I love that idea. As aliens are attacking Earth, I just want to go get a slice of pizza. And I guess for context, I imagine most people listening have seen the film, but in case you haven't, Lupita Nyong'o's character of Sam is a terminally ill cancer patient. So she knows that she's going to die. She has no urgency to survive. Maybe a little bit in the beginning, but mostly she just wants to go get a slice of pizza as the last thing she's going to do as she's dying from cancer. But the relationship she strikes up with Eric, played by Joseph Quinn, is really gorgeous here. And I love the humanity that is brought out through those characters, and the film just not giving one iota of care toward the spectacle. In fact, I wouldn't surprise me if Sarnowski didn't even direct those scenes. He handed that off to another
studio, like second unit director to do those.
Exactly.
Yeah,
said, you do
that's
that,
when he went to go
scenes.
Get some coffee.
Exactly.
And we do get quite a bit of those scenes of spectacle. I do think they're not as well handled as what John Krasinski did with the first two films, but we do get enough moments in between that are pretty compelling. And honestly, that final scene in day one mostly saves the film for me, because it's that acknowledgement that, hey, this really isn't a film tied to this franchise in the way that you might be looking for. It really is its own separate thing. And it does the Sarnowski thing by sort of pulling the rug from under your feet and deconstructing the tropes of what you might expect from this franchise, which I thought was really fascinating. So I don't know if it's my favorite of the three, but it at least has my favorite scene of the entire franchise, being the scene at the bar, I'll simply say. I thought that was really great.
Yeah, the scene at the bar. I love the scene in the apartment as well. I just love, this film slows down often. Even when we do get spectacle, it's often brief. It's shot extremely well. Like, the film just doesn't care to have a sense of urgency. And I love that about this film. Now, the other Quiet Places don't have the same sense of urgency as a lot of other blockbusters as well. Something like a Twisters, for example, where it's just, there's stuff happening all at once. And look, that's
keeps it the ethos a little bit.
That's the
you're right.
ethos of a Twisters movie. So I'm not trying to say that as a bad thing, but I do love that the Quiet Place movies take advantage of its lore. It's going to be quiet, so you have to fill that with something interesting. And I think the first two movies did a pretty good job of that, especially the second movie as well. I don't know where this ranks for me. It might be my favorite of the three.
I was just going to ask you. Like, I feel like it's either this one or the first one, based on the sounds of your review of it right now.
Yeah, I just love how different it is. Again, I love how simple it is. It's very subversive in that regard, and I just love how it's not really concerned with the spectacle as much as it is the humanity of those characters and finding life and purpose through each other, like randomly as they come about. I mean, really, my only issue with the film is how it seemingly transitions to a completely, I don't want to say completely different film, but the way it establishes itself quickly fizzles out. Like the Jaimin Hansu character just completely disappears until
Oh yeah,
the end
he's
of the
just
film.
there for the continuity, I think.
Yeah, like that's a little handled a little weird. So I would certainly dock it for that. But I think
that may not have
everything
even
in the
been
middle is-
Sarnowski's choice. He may have
You
been
know, yeah,
forced to
exactly.
have
That could have
it.
been a studio thing. Who knows?
Yeah.
But broadly speaking, it's again, it's about the character moments. It's about subverting what you would expect out of a movie like this, and I think it handles that gorgeously.
Well, we need to
loved it.
see more movies that are big tentpole films, smaller tentpole films, maybe like the Quiet Place franchise specifically, where you bring in a new filmmaker and they actually make one of their movies within the system.
Yeah, that's what it felt like to me.
Yeah. And while there are moments where Sarnowski clearly had to compromise with the studios to make this
For
a
sure.
Quiet Place movie, or make this a Quiet Place movie. That's weirdly grammatically hard to say.
Yeah.
But the fact that he still had to make a movie in this franchise, but for the most part, still feels like a Sarnowski film. That's at least a good thing.
That's a win. And
yeah.
and again, to circle it back to the conversation we were just having about the box office and, hey, is everything going to be IP? It already feels that way, and it pretty much is, and it might be getting worse. But if that's the direction we're heading, give
because
me
that's the
more
thing.
of these.
This didn't really feel like IP, which I respect.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree. And that's how I felt watching this. I almost forgot it was a Quiet Place movie, that it was part of a franchise.
I know, and that's the thing. It's called A Quiet Place Day One, which admittedly I don't love that title, but I also do love that title because it is sort of goes back to my thoughts on how it pulls the rug from under your feet from what you might expect from this film. But it doesn't give you any new information really than the second Quiet Place film that took place in the small town during day one already gave us, right?
Exactly.
So in a way, as a quote unquote prequel, it's actually very unsuccessful. But I kind of like that it's unsuccessful as a prequel to an overarching franchise because it doesn't really care about establishing new things to tie us into the franchise. So it's a weird way of defending the movie.
I agree. Like if I just look at it on its own terms, I just love the craft here. And I love that subversive quality. I mean, even if you remove the emotion of it all, and that is first and foremost what I responded to the most. But even that aside, well, and I don't know if you can separate it because it is kind of all part of it. But, I mentioned the score earlier. That truly is one of my favorite scores of the year. And it is such a significant part of the emotion and how that is crystallized here. But I also think of the cinematography, again, for a quote unquote summer movie like this, it is gorgeously shot. It is very beautifully shot. Say what you will about the VFX of it all. But when Sarnowski is able to do interesting things with the camera, oh boy, is he. And I do appreciate that for a movie like this, especially when you compare it to, as you talked about in the Twisters review, how it looked like a nothing burger as far as its filmmaking goes, despite shooting it all on film and all that sort of stuff. You compare A Quiet Place Day 1 to Twisters, it's not even close.
Yeah.
A Quiet Place Day 1
shooting on film is not the magic formula. It's what you do with it.
It's what you do with the camera. And Sarnowski creates some exquisite imagery in that film. Some great use of color at times. That I really, really loved. The performances, of course, as we talked about earlier, and just utilizing the quietness of this film, like taking full advantage of that and making the humanity come through. Like I love that about the film, despite, you can tell when the studio gets involved, and that's where the film does suffer. But for the most part, they let Sarnowski do what Sarnowski does. And again, he spent $67 million on a movie that is essentially about finding pizza. Like, it's crazy. Like it's crazy
with
how
a cute cat.
Yeah, exactly. With a great cat. Yeah. Gotta love that. But at any rate, like, okay, if this is how it's going to be moving forward, give me Dune Part 2.
Yeah.
Like things of that nature.
Yeah. And hopefully they do well.
Directors direct. Yeah.
Yeah. You hired him for a reason, right?
Yeah. And and it's also interesting when you compare it to like Horizon, that came out where it's kind of billed as this epic Western, and it's not necessarily relying on IP. If anything, it might be relying on Western tropes and
It's relying on
iconography and things of
genre.
that nature.
Yeah.
Relying on genre, which
Yeah.
a lot of
That's
movies do,
fine.
and that's
Yeah.
perfectly fine.
His
because
audience
it's-
is going to go to that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But clearly not enough, right? Because Horizon did not do well,
Well,
at the box office.
When I
so
say
it's-
his audience, I think he only has a very small audience, sadly, and most of
Yeah.
them just like to sit at home and watch movies nowadays.
Yeah.
Which I will say, we're not really talking about this as a news item, but on the subject of Horizon, hey, I'm glad we got confirmation that we are in fact getting part 2, and it's going.
we
to
are getting
Venice.
part 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, given that it's Costner, and that's another one that I hope to catch up with this week to talk about next week, or maybe
Okay.
once we get through the retrospective, because obviously we're going to be busy prepping for
Yeah,
that,
that's priority.
because that came out at the same time when I had COVID, so I haven't had a chance to see it, but it is available to rent. I just got to find the time to do it, and then
That's
we
fair.
can similarly talk about it here on the show.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's interesting that those movies are suffering when all of this IP, seems to be taking reins of the box office, and
Yeah.
it is a little deflating coming off the heels of Barbenheimer last year. Well, it felt like, well, maybe audience expectations or what we're wanting from movies, maybe that's changing a little bit, and this year it's been a little, well, I don't know, maybe that's not the case.
I don't. Yeah, I don't want to quite say yet that it's the exact opposite, but I don't know. I'm almost have to say that it is.
But at the same time, part of this I think comes down to the Hollywood system as well, because what our
That's what we're getting.
audiences
Yeah.
they have no choice but to respond to this, because that's mostly what we're getting here.
There's no opportunity to create a Barbenheimer-like situation this summer.
Yeah.
Sadly. So yeah, you're right. Circumstantially, just the option to repeat that is just not there.
Exactly. And that's where, again, you count wins like Longlegs
Yeah.
and Civil War. Say what you will about those movies, but those
they did
movies
well
did
for those
very
yeah.
well.
They
And
did well
that's
for those
where-
studios. They made money. They were profitable.
Yeah, they were very profitable. So, and that's where, I'm kind of hoping something like Trap, which is something I wanted to bring up here as well, because it's at what, $15 million domestically. Not that M. Night Shyamalan, like this phase of his career, he's not going to be making $100 million at the box office
No,
anymore.
he's not.
I never really expected Trap to dominate at the box office.
That's
but-
roughly around the same of his previous 2 movies opening weekend, right? Give or take a few million.
Yeah. I'd be curious to go back and look at what Glass was.
I
'Cause
think
it
that
felt
was
like
his
that had some
highest.
marketing.
That was his
Yeah.
highest. But that had a lot of that. I mean, again, that had an IP related push.
Yeah, exactly.
It wasn't Knock at the Cabin and Old. I think were also around that 15 mil mark, maybe somewhere in the range of like 13 to 18, somewhere in there. I don't really know which one is on the higher end of that spectrum, but they were all fairly similar as far as their opening weekend domestic results.
So Glass ended up at 111 domestically,
Okay.
which is pretty good. And then $247 million worldwide.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Which, like that for M. Night Shyamalan, I'd say that's quite good, and that's probably given him the space to make these movies he's done.
And
the last few years,
what was
Knock
the
at
budget
Cabin.
on that film? Because Glass was not an expensive film.
$20 million. $20 million. That was a huge win for M. Night. Yes.
You look at the profitability spectrum and you actually take a calculator there. Shouldn't that mean that that's one of the most profitable movies ever made? Because that is
I mean, I don't know about ever,
that is
but
a
that's
huge jump.
Yeah, that feels old school. Like right now we're doing the 2000s in terms of these retrospectives, and it felt like that was more along those lines, or the 90s, where you can get these movies that were made for $20 million. Like people forget, like that was the norm. Like a lot of movies were in that $20 to $50 million range, but then they would go on to gross, $100, $200 million. And it wasn't necessarily IP driven. Of course, Glass is IP driven a little bit, but
It
you know,
was.
but not to the same extent as a Marvel or anything like that. And I think that's why it's still very impressive, because
I
it's not
agree.
as if Unbreakable is on the pedestal of comic book movies when you compare it to something like X-Men or The Dark Knight or what we've seen with the MCU.
Yeah, financially, although people would probably say quality-wise, it should be in the conversation.
Yes,
now.
absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. And
Yeah.
and a lot of people do, but generally speaking, it's not talked about in that same
It
vein.
doesn't have the same bigness as those movies. Yeah, it's a very different
Absolutely.
beast.
And Split, which I don't have those numbers in front of me at the moment, but people walked into that not knowing that it was tethered to Unbreakable. So it didn't have a
What a
marketing
twist.
time. Yeah. Glass, on the other hand, had that advantage, and
Yeah.
that's obviously what led to that success and why M. Night's been able to make the movies he wants to make now, which is very exciting.
It's very exciting. Yeah,
You
we
know?
love when we see that happen. Can't wait to talk about Trap. I cannot wait to talk about that movie.
I can't wait to talk about it either. And that's a movie that was made for $30 million, so a little bit more than Glass even. So it's not like it has to do a lot to make its money back, but now that it's heading into its second weekend, how much of a drop off are we going to get? I would hope that it's able to get to that $30 million, and especially because I don't think it's done a whole lot or worldwide quite yet.
I don't think it has. I think it has more to trickle out into some markets. So I'm not sure
I
if
think
it's
there's
made
some more
every
markets
market
it's
yet.
got to get to. Yeah.
Yeah. And it does make sense that the movie was even more expensive than something like Glass, even despite the marketing push that a movie like Glass had, because I think M. Night even had to put on his own constructed concert for a movie like Trap. So
that's where the money went.
Yeah, but that's like such an old school thing. Remember when we watched movies back in the 90s, even basic romantic comedies, we would see two people at a sports game, but they were really there and there were actually people in the arena. Like nowadays that is maneuvered by visual effects and green screen and AI simulated people. I miss the days when everything was just that tactical.
That's what I appreciated about Axel F. It might not be the greatest of movies, but they were actually at that Red Wings game.
Yeah, because you're like, I remember that game. I watched that game.
I watched that game. I do remember it. Yeah.
That's
so
incredible.
You're all right. You have to admire that because it could easily be rendered through CGI these days. No
it's unfortunate.
Before we get to M. Night, though, one other quick thing that I wanted to talk about here real fast. So last week, we, of course, talked about Robert Downey Jr. coming back to the MCU as Dr. Doom. I still do not like the idea.
I don't like it.
I do not buy into the notion that this is going to be a good thing. Not even just for the cynical reasons as Ryan brought up earlier. I just think even artistically, the vision of bringing him back as that character, I think it's insipid and it is desperate.
Yeah.
However, the other thing we talked about, the main point that I brought up, aside from my reservation of him coming back as that character, what is Marvel going to do up until we get to those next two Avengers films? Because all we have is Deadpool and Wolverine, of course. We have Captain America and Fantastic Four. That's it. So how are we going to do Secret Wars with just those characters? It feels like there are gaps missing.
Yeah.
And this Friday is D23.
Yep.
Marvel will, of course, have a panel. What do we expect is going to take place there?
Well, if it wasn't so close to their announcements at Hall H at Comic-Con just recently, my first thought would be, well, the first thing they're going to announce are new release dates for Avengers Doomsday and Avengers Secret Wars to be like 5 years down the line. I doubt they're going to do that because they literally just announced that last week as we're recording this. But I don't know. I think if I'm going to make a guess, there are a few individual movies that I don't think they've announced yet that we're probably going to get announcements for. I wouldn't be surprised if somehow sprinkled through all of this, we're going to get an announcement of Spider-Man 4, maybe Doctor Strange 3, maybe Thor 5. I know some people are speculating that we're finally going to get a Scarlet Witch solo movie, which I would be pretty interested in if that ends up happening. But how do you fit all of this in before Avengers Doomsday on May 2026?
Exactly.
Which means the only way for that to work is if they pull from existing characters we already know. Like there's I think I've heard some people speculate that Avengers Doomsday is only going to feature the Marvel characters that are actually not tied to the MCU, which means we're going to get the Fox characters and the Sony characters only. And maybe the Fantastic Four as an introductory point into that.
I could see that. That kind of makes sense.
Yeah, but to your point, I can they only do that? Like maybe that's the introductory point to then get to Secret Wars, which will then sprinkle in all of these MCU characters that are being simultaneously introduced and carried over. I don't know. I feel like something like that's going to happen, but I do think we're going to get a few fast tracks to movies like Spider-Man 4, whatever they're going to call it. I think that's one we're going to hear about.
Yeah, I think either they are secretly shooting movies and have not told anybody.
I will not predict that. I don't think they're that smart.
Well, even if they were that smart, how do you hide that from journalists and
let me say it again. I don't think they're going to be that successful.
That's the thing. Yeah. Like even if they were smart, I don't think you could pull that off in this day and age. It would get leaked. Someone would leak something, a script, part of a script, a video, a photo, something would have gone out. You just can't hide that fully. Yeah. I don't think, but who knows? I think the more realistic option here, and I agree with you, I think Doomsday and Secret Wars gets pushed back.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, where are these characters going to come from? Unless Doomsday is the solution there, as you suggest, and we get the Fantastic Four. That's where the X-Men come into the fold in a really big way. And that then leads into Secret Wars. I could see that being the case.
Yeah.
But is that going to be enough? Because even if they do that, even if Doomsday is great, does it still have a little bit of that Batman versus Superman thing leading into...
Oh, it definitely does.
Like, doesn't it feel a little bit like that, where we're forcing and contriving and squeezing as much as we can into and leading up to Secret Wars? Like, that's why Justice League didn't work very well, despite from the criticisms you could loft at Zack Snyder and his style of filmmaking.
It was rushed along. Yeah, it was rushed. DC was playing catch up to Marvel because Marvel at that time was succeeding in more ways than one.
Yes. And right now, Marvel might be becoming a victim of the same thing. And instead of regurgitating their own formula that was successful, it does feel like, granted, some of this is not their fault. They did not anticipate Jonathan Majors doing what he did, and that completely revamping their trajectory.
I just wish they would recast Kang. I really wish
that would have been so much easier. That would have been so much easier. Then you could continue doing what you're doing. But I also think part of this is also the volatility of Phase 5. I think they're looking at the whole multiverse thing going, look, some of it's worked, a lot of it hasn't. Maybe we'll use this Jonathan Majors fiasco as an excuse to completely rework what we're doing,
to pivot
and shift and pivot a little bit.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's necessarily a bad idea, but at the same time, you don't want to rush and force your way in.
Yeah.
And then reap the same failures that DC did with Batman v Superman. And this does feel that way a little bit.
It's hard not to see this whole Doomsday introductory thing. it's hard not to see it as damage control right now. Because that's what it feels like, given the unfortunate realities surrounding Jonathan Majors and what that did to the MCU and the Kang character. Although I do think recasting would have been the easiest and probably the cheapest way to go about it. But at the same time, quality-wise, you're right. Have people really been all that invested in the multiversal thing as it relates to Kang just yet? I'm not sure that they were. I think the vast majority of people weren't quite there yet. And I think it was also, while I say it's also a creative decision for Marvel, that doesn't necessarily mean it's the right or even a good creative decision. I do think that was part of it. I think they recognized that the interest just wasn't there in the same way that it was for Thanos in the Infinity Saga. And I get that.
Yeah. And, I think they gambled a little bit in the same way maybe they did with Thanos. Now, Thanos is obviously a huge character in the comics, but I don't think that he was a household name either.
Yeah.
Kang, similarly, not a household name, broadly speaking. I think it is a great character, a huge, significant character in the comics.
Yeah.
And maybe it works well there. Maybe it's less Kang and more so the multiverse.
I think it's the multiverse and less so
sophistication
Kang.
That is making it difficult.
Like, I think everyone agreed this is pre the news regarding Jonathan Majors. When everyone saw Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, no one said, "Oh, that Jonathan Majors is Kang. He's not working for me." I feel like hardly anyone liked that movie, but everyone seemed to agree he was probably the best thing in it. So I think there was at least an interest.
There was still potential for Kang.
There was still potential for Kang, but I think the potential for the multiversal thing was starting to dwindle.
Yeah, because I would still argue, again, separate from his nonsense off screen, but we talked about his performance in the Loki shows, especially season 1. He was very good there as well.
I agree.
So, I do think the character was mostly working. It was the execution of the
story that was serving him, I think, was the problem. Yeah,
for sure. And I do agree with that. However, I will say the reason I bring that up is to say Doom, and maybe part of this was the Fox thing, because I can't remember exactly when that transition happened. I guess it was during Phase 5, so they couldn't. Yeah. But I imagine Marvel wanted to fast track that transition as fast as possible. I would bet that Doom was where they wanted to go next, and they had to simply wait. And now it's messy, but we're finally getting there. I don't know. We're obviously never going to get those details, but
I forgot who tweeted this. It was a very arguably insensitive tweet, but it made me laugh nonetheless. It said, or it showed a picture of Robert Downey Jr. from Tropic Thunder and said, "Why didn't they just recast Kang with Robert Downey Jr.?"
Yes. No, like this, I did not like the Doom thing, but the memes were pretty great.
The memes were pretty great. Well, I mean, this is why we talked about this in the same way with Jay last week, in that we don't like this decision, but as a business and marketing decision, it's kind of brilliant. It's kind of brilliant.
It makes sense. A lot of people are very excited about it. I'm just not one of those. I don't.
Yeah, Marvel's very good at getting woos out of Hall H. They really are.
And even, like, while our world, the critic cinephile world, I would say we were mostly dubious. Not many liked it. But broadly speaking, when you get outside of our bubble, I think there was a lot more. There were a lot more people that were excited.
Yeah, they like the idea of it. I get it.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's hard to say. My biggest question, despite the RDJ of it all, I don't like it, but it's going to happen. We might as well accept it. But the biggest question I have moving forward is, how are they going to build up to Secret Wars? That was my whole because the X-Men have got to be introduced at some point. We know Fantastic Four is coming. We have our trickling previous Avengers characters out there somewhere. We know that they're probably going to be involved some way or another. If we're bringing back RDJ, is a variant of Tony Stark going to be involved in this as well. I don't think that's out of the question here at all.
Yeah.
But we have to kind of build there. There's Blade as well. If that comes out,
if that ever happens, that you mentioned Blade, and that is really Blade specifically is not my biggest question here, but it relates to my biggest question as to what we might expect from D23, or what I'm at least hoping to see from Marvel going forward, some type of announcement. And that being, what's the new timeline of events? What's the new schedule? Like when we talked about Phase 3 and Phase 2 back during the Infinity Saga, Marvel didn't always keep to their schedule, but it was at least still pretty crystal clear of where things were going. Because I'm at a point now, and maybe this is more my fault and how disconnected I've started to become from it. I don't even know what phase we're in anymore. I'm so confused by all this.
I still think we're at the end of Phase 5 because Agatha all along, which is coming out soon, is a part of Phase 5. And then we have Daredevil Born Again, which is supposed to be coming out soon as well, or early next year. That's also part of Phase 5. And Ironheart. I imagine if they're going to still do Ironheart, I think that was
I don't know if
maybe going to get cut. I'm not exactly sure. Young Avengers is in there as well. So, and I imagine they're going to talk about that at D23 as well. But that's not so much my question because we know those are coming out. Seemingly, we know Daredevil's coming out.
I just don't know how they fit within these phase cutoffs. Like each phase in phases 1, 2, and 3 felt like they were solid bookmarks, creatively and logistically. Yeah. And it's not like that anymore. Maybe that's kind of the point, because it is a multiversal, weird kind of conglomerate of ingredients. But there's no bookmarking here, and it's getting really confusing, I think.
And also, I don't think that Daredevil and Agatha, Young Avengers, Thunderbolts, I don't know if they're going to be a part of Secret Wars. Maybe I don't know. They will, but I don't think that they would be as big a draw as the X-Men. So at some point, whether it's an X-Men movie or you bring in Wolverine, hell, you could do a Gambit movie now. I would love to see that as well. I want a Gambit movie. I want Channing Tatum and his Gambit movie to finally crystallize.
I want that to exist. Yeah.
I want that more than anything for him.
I'll take an Elektra movie at this point again.
Yeah. I don't know if you saw, he put out an emotional response.
I love that. I thought that was sweet.
Yeah, oh, so good. Like, he was so happy and thrilled. Like, that's, when we were doing the Wolverine, the Deadpool and Wolverine review, that's what I was trying to articulate. The man had been wanting to do this character forever. He was so passionate about it. I was heartbroken for him when it never crystallized previously. So for him to don the cape and do the accent and everything we see in that film, like, I just had so much fun with it. I was so happy for him. I love Channing Tatum. He was great. I want to see that movie as well. Like, I just feel like whatever's coming down the pipeline, I think they're going to announce something that we just haven't heard of yet. And I think they're going to delay these 2 Avengers films. I
kind of hope they do, because I think they need some type of recalibration to make this work from a timing standpoint. It just feels so rushed at this point now.
Yeah, either that or to something I believe you said a moment ago as well. They're going to fast track these, like big time fast track these.
Which I don't think is the right way to go, because that usually leads to creative bankruptcy when you look at the final product.
Well, even though I somewhat joked that maybe they've been secretly shooting these movies, that's probably not true. But they might have been secretly casting these films. They're already written and ready to go, that when it's revealed at D23, hey, here's the director, here's the cast, we're shooting in a month. I could see that happening.
Same.
And that might be what we get. We'll obviously talk about all of this next week when it's revealed what it actually is. Maybe we're completely wrong.
Watch it be like nothing.
It's going to be nothing. Yeah. You never know.
We come out of it just as confused as we are now.
Exactly. Brendan, let's talk about coffee. I love coffee.
So good. How much did you drink? Coffee. How much did you drink when you were on the cruise?
Actually, well, I didn't drink a ton of coffee, but I would have a little bit for breakfast.
Okay.
Nothing too crazy because we were so busy, and
That's
you're
what's giving
always
you your
eating a lot
natural
of food
energy
Yeah,
anyway.
like you're always out and about. The most I would drink is sometime after lunch when we would take the baby to our room for him to take his nap in the afternoon.
Sure.
I would once he's down, I would make an espresso and have that in the room and just sit on our balcony and look out into the ocean and
That sounds
contemplate life.
amazing.
You know,
Oh,
it's
gosh.
amazing. Yeah, it's the best.
Nothing beats a great cup of coffee with a great view. Like that
Exactly.
marriage is so good.
And what goes great with the best views is the best coffee, and that's why you
Absolutely.
got to check out Coffee Cult, because it is the best. It's all about quality. You can get
Absolutely.
coffee anywhere, and a lot of coffee places, they want to acquire cheap, lesser grade coffee because, you know, they want to make a little bit of profit.
Just a
And
little
they
bit. Just a little
know-
bit.
They know you're going to want milk and sugar and all of these other additives that, one, spike up the price of the coffee and make it more into a dessert than coffee.
Yeah, caffeinated milk.
Exactly. And look, that's not great coffee. Coffee Call isn't about making specialty drinks. They're about specialty grade coffee, which is high-end gourmet coffee. This is coffee that already organically, naturally has notes of honey and chocolate and strawberries and blueberries, depending on the coffee. Like whatever it is, it already has these flavorful notes that don't need additives to it. And it's fantastic. It's what I love so much about Coffee Cult. It's all about great high-end coffee. And it's the best, and you gotta check them out. So go to coffeecult.com. That's coffee with a K, cult with a K, coffeecult.com. At checkout, select your coffee, and at checkout, use the code ISF24. Again, that code is ISF24, and you'll get 15% off your order. So it's a great way to check out the coffee. And look, if you like it. If you like the coffees, you can subscribe and get them every 6 weeks, 8 weeks, whatever frequency you like. You can set that frequency, and that automatically comes with a 15% discount if you subscribe. So you can get your Coffee Cult every time for 15% off, and
it's so good.
it's just a win-win. So use our code as a trial run.
Yeah,
it's really great in that way.
Order that Sumatra and get a great tasting one up front, and
that's a
realize,
great
okay,
coffee.
now it's time to subscribe.
There you go. Absolutely. So again, coffeecult.com. Use that code ISF24, and we thank Coffee Cult for their support. All right, Brennan, let's talk about audiobooks. Audible.
I'm still a stickler for physical media, and that includes physical books, but at the same time, there's something kind of powerful about listening to a great audiobook that's so well performed, and you can find so many of them on Audible. They house so many of them. It's amazing.
Yeah, that's how you know Brennan is not a parent, whereas I am a parent, and Audible is the way to go.
I mean, my wife loves audiobooks as well, and she's found many of them via Audible as well. And I've listened to some of them as well. It might not be necessarily content I gravitate towards, but I certainly can understand the power of a great audiobook based on what she's listening to.
Oh, I've loved Audible. Yeah, I've listened to a lot of books on there. I'm an avid listener. I famously, at least within the context of InSession Film lore anyway, went through all of the Harry Potter books last year.
Yep.
In which Brendan and I talked a lot about that experience on our Patreon bonus content.
Yeah.
And it was a great time going through all of that. I'm reading the Lord of the Rings currently right now. And that's been an interesting experience all on its own as well.
It's so good.
And I'm going to get to Dune next. Like Dune's next.
Oh, yeah. You're going Frank Herbert. Classic stories. And guess what? They're all on Audible.
All on Audible. It's fantastic. And if you want a 30-day free trial, go to audibletrial.com/InSessionFilm. We've obviously only listed a handful there, but they have over 150,000 titles to choose from. They have a ton of stuff. Everything from like classic, fun sci-fi fantasy, but there's a lot of like education books on there. There's business books, whatever you want. They certainly have it there. So go to Audible. I vouch for them. I've used them for the last 3 years that I've been subscribed, 2 or 3 years, and I love it. I absolutely love it a lot. The app is real easy to use. So again, that's audibletrial.com/InSessionFilm, and you'll get a free audiobook. I should mention that as well. You get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial. I mean,
a lot of good stuff. You can't go wrong.
You can't go wrong with that. So go check that out. Go check out Audible, and we thank them for their support. All right, with all of that said, let's go ahead and transition to our boy, the wonderful, the great, the redemptive M. Night Shyamalan.
I love this man. I love this man.
Great. I love him too. We talked about him a little over a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago. It was one of our first episodes once we transitioned to doing this video format. Around last February or so, we did an episode about the rise, the fall, and the comeback of M. Night Shyamalan.
Yeah.
And it was a really fun conversation. It was really great if you want to go and check that episode out. But yes, he has had such a fascinating career. Such a fascinating career. We're obviously not going to get into it similarly or to the depths that we did in that episode, but he comes out swinging with The Sixth Sense. Obviously, he had Wide Awake previously, but The Sixth Sense, Unbreakable, Signs, those 3 films, killer. He was put on the map in a big way.
Yeah.
Then comes The Village, a little mixed at the time. I will say though,
very divisive film. Would you say The Village is maybe that first true pivot point in his career, or would you say it's Lady in the Water?
No, The Village for sure. 100% The Village.
I think that's an interesting question to ask, because I think from a general audience response standpoint, yes, that is that first pivot point. But I think artistically, The Village feels more closer in line with
agree.
Those three movies. Yeah.
And I think that's why it's getting the resurgence these days that it's getting, because that artistry has always been there. In fact, most of the conversation, I would say, comes down to its twist at the end. People just did not like. A lot of people hated that ending. And I will admit, in 2004, I was not a fan of it either. However, in 2024, 20 years later, I revisited The Village, and that film freaking slaps.
You visited The Village. You revisited it.
Yes.
Yeah, you went back to The Village.
I'm a village head now.
I am so glad to hear that, JD. I think it's a great movie. We'll talk about how great it is when we get to our rankings here. But I think
2024 has been a redemptive arc for me, it turns out.
Oh yeah,
personally, between
The Village and then Miami Vice. Yeah,
yeah, exactly. It's just been a reversal year for me.
Movies that we agree with the resurgence that they're getting, but then they're finding an audience and it's expanding like that. It's so awesome to see. It really is.
But I will say, even with Miami Vice, I agree with a lot of what Jay said when it comes to Miami Vice, because he opened that review, that infamous review, when I laid out my criticisms of the film. His response to that was, "I get it. I totally understand. I have nothing to push back, because Miami Vice is one of those movies that you do just have to vibe with."
Well, it's one of those movies where your criticisms are what someone loves about the film, right?
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. And similarly with The Village, even though I've come around on it and I do really love it now, I still understand why people are reserved. But that filmmaking that you're talking about, that is more in line with those first 3 movies, or the previous 3 anyway, yeah, it's there in The Village. The artistry is unbelievable.
That's the thing. It's clearly M. Night knows what he's doing, and he has conviction in trying to do that. It's just whether you're on his wavelength or not. He has trademarks, and not everyone likes those trademarks. Heck, sometimes those trademarks of his don't necessarily work in the particular movie he might be making at the time. But you can't knock his movies for simply making no sense, as some people like to say, or they have illogical plotting, or they have awkward dialogue. That's like saying you don't like, or you're saying, oh, that Wes Anderson movie's bad because it has a dollhouse aesthetic. No, that's a trademark of his. You either like it or you don't.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, I completely agree. I look forward to talking about that with Trap, but it's a big part of his movies, and I've always appreciated that. Like, especially when you have actors that know how to chew on that dialogue properly. Mel Gibson, again, say what you will about the man, but in Signs, him and Joaquin Phoenix, ooh, they chewed on it so perfectly. So incredible.
Might be his best performance.
Absolutely. And a lot of people recently have been saying with something like The Happening, that film could have been interesting if you have the right cast in there, but it's completely miscast.
That movie, I'm so glad it exists as it is, because that is a great case study of what can go wrong and how it can fully derail your movie 100%.
Yeah. And it's credence as to why a casting Oscar makes sense.
It's so important.
It's so important. Yeah, exactly. The other thing too, when revisiting The Village, I think M. Night Shyamalan, the collaboration of M. Night Shyamalan and James Newton Howard might be a top 10 all-time director-composer.
I want to see that come back so bad. I want to see
him.
Oh my God. But again, like, he self-finances his films so much. I don't know if he can afford James Newton Howard anymore.
I know. Newton Howard might have to come back on a pay cut.
Yeah. He might
have to, maybe.
Yeah, he has to come back for charity.
For charity, yeah. But man, everyone wants it. Come on, James, if you're listening, we all want it.
I would.
Maybe we can start a GoFundMe to fund that portion of it.
It might be the nerdiest thing we've ever suggested, but I'd be here for it.
Absolutely. And I don't think I remembered this. The Village, shot by Roger Deakins. I did not remember that until recently. Crazy. The names attached to that film it's pretty insane.
What a movie. We'll talk we'll talk about all these as we go through this.
At any rate, but The Village is the pivot point. It was polarized, and then the next three, it's just fall off a cliff.
That's its own like unique phase. Like he has his first phase, then he has his second phase, and now he's in this new phase, this resurgence where he's taking these creative swings in a very B-movie like way. And in a weird way, you look at most people's rankings of his entire filmography, they're kind of broken up by these three phases. They're all sort of grouped together in a way, and it sort of makes sense.
Yeah, no, it's wild. Yeah, Lady in the Water all the way through After Earth. I think most people will recognize that's the worst phase of M. Night.
Those are 4 films in there. Lady in the Water,
4 in a row.
The Happening, Last Airbender, and After Earth. I mean, yeah, we can we just go ahead and spoil it now? Those are his 4 worst
movies? Those are the bottom 4. Yeah, those are the bottom 4. Absolutely. And then he comes back with The Visit in 2015, which I really liked. And then, of course, Split, Glass, Old in 2021, Knock at the Cabin last year, and then here he is with Trap. So, yeah, fascinating career. Let's go ahead and rank these. As we've done, this is going to be a collective ranking.
This is going to be hard.
Brendan and I have our own individual rankings, of course. Yeah. But we have to find a middle ground here. And this will be interesting because, the 3 phases, I think, will show themselves. But there are going to be a few films here that I know that we are a little bit different on. So I'm curious as to where this lands.
Yeah, me too.
Where should we start? I guess let's start with those first 3. The Sixth Sense.
Well, before we do we want to start with his... So let me first admit, I have not seen Praying with Anger, his first official film from the early 90s.
Yes. Yeah, I've not seen that one either.
But I have seen Wide Awake.
Okay.
It's not great. I like the idea of it more than the execution, which is something you might be able to say about a lot of M. Night films.
Yeah.
But that one in particular, if there's anything I like about that film, there's a sequence maybe an hour into it that features our main group of young boys at this, I think it's a Catholic school, if I'm not mistaken, but they see this flower ceremony carried on by the females of the other school, the girls of the other school, it's a virgin ceremony of sorts. And one of the girls is apparently the main character's crush of sorts. It's kind of like the little kid thing to do.
Okay.
And one of the nuns is played by my 4th grade teacher. So
Oh yeah, I do remember you saying that. Yeah, you've told that story before.
So she has a key visual.
Yeah,
It's like,
yeah.
oh, that's hi, Gene Orlando. Hi, and good to see you again.
Yeah.
So if anything, that makes me not rank it at the bottom. Just the fact that I have like a personal tie into that movie.
Okay.
But anyway, movie's not great. It's not great.
All right, fair enough. I haven't seen it, so I'll let you handle that one. Do we want to start at The Sixth Sense?
We
as
can start
far
there
as-
and just go
okay.
chronologically from here.
Okay. So we'll put that at number 1. The Sixth Sense is number 1.
Great movie. That's a great movie.
It is a great movie. So then from there, we get to Unbreakable in 2000, which may or may not show up on our 2000 retrospective coming up here pretty soon.
Yeah.
Unbreakable. Do you put that above The Sixth Sense?
Some days I
This is where
do,
it gets
some days
hard.
I don't.
It
This is what
gets
this is
hard.
what
It
it
gets hard.
this is why I think M. Night Shyamalan is one of the most fascinating filmmakers working today, or really ever. And it's why I love the guy, and I continue to love the guy even more as years go on, because my rankings of his movies change almost daily. It really depends on the
Yeah.
mood that I'm in. Right now, I would say I do prefer The Sixth Sense over Unbreakable. The one thing about
Okay.
Unbreakable that maybe puts it down a little bit is I still cannot wrap my head around the film's ending, the way it just ends on text on screen like that. It is one of the weirdest things I think I've ever seen in an M. Night film. I almost find it kind of dramatically deflating. But M. Night always does things like that because he has a point. There's some type of purpose to everything he does, whether you like it or not. And I still haven't wrapped my head around that. But leading up to that thing that still scratches my head, I think for the most part, Unbreakable is a better movie than The Sixth Sense as far as how it
Yeah.
functions from beginning to end. It's just
Okay.
that one thing that I find frustrating in a way that I can't really comprehend yet. So I think that's why I have it slightly below The Sixth Sense, just given how The Sixth Sense sticks the landing so beautifully. And the way it feels like an emotional payoff as opposed to just a narrative twist, I think is what gives that film its staying power.
Yeah, I love Unbreakable. Here's the thing about M. Night. I love all the films I have in my 1 through 6 on my personal ranking, which will be revealed as we go here.
Yeah.
I have, of that top 6, I have The Sixth Sense appropriately at number 6.
I find that so baffling. I really do.
But here's the thing. I love the movie. Like, I love it. Look, if
One of the best films of
it
its
wouldn't-
year.
It wouldn't take much for you to convince me that it's his best movie. If you came to me with a strong argument to go, The Sixth Sense is M. Night's best, and here's X, Y, and Z as to why, I would sit here and go, you're right. You're totally right. I don't disagree. But I have it at number 6. It's because I love every one of those movies in that top 6.
Yeah.
So like I can be swayed here. I think with Unbreakable, it's a little bit of the duality of reality and the stories we tell and how he weaves that into that film and the performances, the disorientation of the film. It just has these nuances that I do really love. And maybe I'm a little bit on the other end of the coin to you. In the sense that, pun intended, I guess, that I think The Sixth Sense is a better movie, but Unbreakable just has
Well,
these thematic and emotional textures
okay,
that just speak to me a little bit
Let
more personally, I guess.
No, I get that. I guess let me rephrase what I said earlier in calling
Okay.
Unbreakable a better movie when compared to The Sixth Sense, because I think you're right. The Sixth Sense from beginning, middle, and end is a smoother and tighter and more efficient experience. But I think M. Night's direction is better in Unbreakable. I think he's doing
Fair. Yeah.
I think he's doing a lot of creative things in that movie. So maybe it's not that I think the movie's better, but I think Unbreakable is, from a technical standpoint, it's a better crafted film. It's
okay, that's fair.
Yeah,
Sure.
and maybe that's I guess that's the better way to say what I said earlier.
Yeah. No, I think that's fair. That's a really good way to phrase it. And perhaps that's why I lean toward Unbreakable personally a little bit more. So
There are sequences in that movie, even just the opening credit sequence, that lingering tracking shot that flows between different seats on the train as we really get the basis of our main character without any exposition to tell us that, I think is it's so well made and so well crafted. The Sixth Sense is really more about the it's really more of a performative piece than I think maybe Unbreakable is, but that's not to knock the performances in Unbreakable. I really do think The Sixth Sense is one of the best ghost stories we've had in the past like 30 or 40 years.
Yeah.
And I find it to be such a relatable story on relational regret, familial regret, and how that manifests itself in the form of the undead. I think is
Oh
a
my
really
gosh,
yeah. I think that's what gives the film its power for me, and why, even though the film ends in one of the most surprising twist endings no one really saw coming at the time, I think weirdly the film gets better knowing its twist.
Yeah.
Like knowing where
Yeah.
it's going to go, and to watch the nuances of how this marriage, Bruce Willis's marriage in particular, deteriorated over time. I
Yeah.
think that's what adds power to it, which is a very smart thing that the movie has up its sleeve.
Yeah, I mean, I think my singular favorite performance of an M. Night film is in Signs, but
Yeah.
I think collectively you could argue The Sixth Sense is the best overall performed of his movies. Bruce Willis is Bruce Willis, and he's really great. Maybe even a little underrated because we think of him as this action star, but he's an actor.
He, like, his stoicism, his trademark stoicism, was used to such a beautiful degree we've never seen before in both The Sixth Sense and Unbreakable.
I agree. Completely agree. Yes.
Yeah.
And then you have Toni Collette, who is absolutely sensational in this film, in The Sixth Sense. She is truly unbelievable. And Haley Joel Osment, between this and AI, one of the best child actors of all time.
Ever. Yeah.
It is incredible what he was able to do in those two movies. It's also a little weird to think about where his career has gone since those two movies. You're like, where did that guy go? But
I know.
Man, as a child actor, there are very few that are on the level of him in those two films.
He gave two of the best child performances of all time just 2 years
and then
apart.
just quit.
Yeah.
Then I'm out of here. Like, it's just crazy.
Isn't another movie coming out this year that I'm looking forward to? Isn't he in that movie Blink Twice? The movie from
I know
Zoe
he's
Kravitz?
still working. Like I'm
Yeah.
not trying to diminish the guy at all, but
Yeah.
it is just funny how he's like, I'm going to give two of the best child performances you've ever seen, and then I'm just going to chill. Like, look,
You know what he needs to do? He needs
Totally
to work with
fine.
M. Night. He needs to work with M. Night Shyamalan again.
come back.
We're getting
Yeah.
the Josh Hart renaissance. Let's get
Exactly,
let's
that's
get the
exactly
Haley
what I
Joel
was
Osment
gonna say.
renaissance.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean, the performances in The Sixth Sense are truly unreal. And you're right. I mean, the performances are so crucial given the storytelling and how Shyamalan hides, reveals. The cast has to do a lot of the heavy lifting there.
Yeah.
And they do it impeccably. So, again, like, I have it ranked at 6th, but I could equally have this at number 2. Easily.
So where
my
do you
list.
have Unbreakable in your personal ranking by comparison?
I have it at 3. I have it at number 3
Okay.
on my personal
Yeah.
list.
So in the spirit of this consensus ranking we're doing right now, you would like to put Unbreakable above The Sixth Sense.
Yeah, by a slight hair, yeah. But
You know,
again,
if
I mean, you can flip it. I'm not going to lose sleep tonight, so it's fine.
I mean, maybe if we want to try and look at it from a collective standpoint, should we put it below The Sixth Sense just because it came afterwards, or do we see it as the directorial improvement in what he would do later? It's like I don't know.
I will say this, regardless of where you want to slot those two movies, Signs at this
Signs
point
is number
has to
one.
be number
Signs
one.
is number
Yes.
one.
Yeah,
I'm
exactly.
writing that in right now. I've got my
Yeah.
notepad up in front of me.
Keep Signs at 1, and you can put Sixth Sense at 2. That's fine. I'm totally fine with that.
Okay, so Signs at 1, Sixth Sense at 2, and then Unbreakable at 3. How's that sound?
Yes, that is perfectly
well,
fine with
this
me.
is where it gets a little hairy because now we're on to The Village from 2004.
Yeah, this does get interesting. And if I didn't watch The Village earlier this week, my answer here would be maybe not very, but it would be different. It would be different.
Yeah.
Because I would put The Village at number 2 here, just behind Signs. I jumped quite a bit on this.
I need to see the film again because much
I know
like
there's
my
one element that you're a little
I think I told you
murky
about
on.
it, and I want to hear your thoughts on it. Like, what do you think of Adrian Brody in The Village?
I don't mind him. I don't mind him at all.
Okay.
I don't think he's the strongest part of the film, but I don't think he deters it enough for me.
Yeah, I think he should have had his Oscar taken away. I think it's that bad.
Look,
I think it's the worst performance in any M. Night film.
The worst performance.
I'd take Mark Wahlberg talking to a plant.
I
think also part of it too is, M. Night has had a reputation for tackling, mental illness and abuse and trauma in his films in a way that do serve a purpose, but they're not always sensitively portrayed, we'll simply say, which is something I usually respect out of him because it at least it sparks a conversation. In the case of including a character like, was it Noah, I believe his name is, in the case of including that character in The Village, I just don't know what purpose it's serving. And I don't think Adrian Brody's performance is good enough to add any type of contextualization that I think the movie might be going for there. And that's where I struggle with. It's more so the inclusion of the character, and because I don't think the performance is doing enough to justify it, makes me hate it even more. And that's where I struggle with that. And where I struggle with it even further, because if it weren't for that one thing I still scratch my head over, I agree with you. I think this is number 2 behind Signs in our collective ranking because everything else I think is so masterful.
Yeah, it doesn't really bother me all that much, but admittedly, I'm so hypnotized by everything else that it's something that I'm willing to forgive. And this has become, I guess, a big talking point in recent weeks as far as the criticisms that can be lofted at M. Night Shyamalan's movies, whether it be his setups, all the quote unquote twists you want to talk about. The dialogue, of course, has been a big talking point. There is an M. Night Shyamalan flavor that if it's not your cup of tea, it is understandable. It's completely understandable. I tend to love it. At least I've come around to. In 2004 again, I was maybe a little mixed on it. I was also I was a senior in high school when this film came out.
Well, of course,
Freshman in college.
At that point, people were latching on to M. Night for the wrong reasons.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
They got a very different film.
My mindset was very different. You're also coming off the heels of some really great movies, as we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
But these days, what defines M. Night Shyamalan as a filmmaker is something that I just really love. And The Village has all of that in spades, and
amplified to a certain degree.
Amplified to 11. Absolutely. So the things that I could loft at criticisms that I do recognize, they slip through the cracks easily for me. I have no problem letting that stuff go. So Adrian Brody, I agree with you. I don't think he's the strongest element of the film, but I don't think he dismantles the film. I don't think he takes away from its thematic or emotional core at all. And I love everything else
You know what?
with every fiber of my being.
It's my personal number 3, sometimes number 4, depending on how I feel about the Adrian Brody of it all. But if I disregard the Adrian Brody of it all, I think The Village is one of the best films ever made. It might
It's
be almost
honestly,
that good. It is. I mean, from the score to the cinematography, which we already talked about, I think, we talk about Bryce Dallas Howard nowadays as kind of a we don't really talk about her as one of the greatest actresses working today, but I think her performance in The Village should have won awards. I think it should have
like
won
that Haley Joel Osment thing we just talked about.
Yeah. And honestly, for myself, and I've talked about this before, coming from Eastern Pennsylvania, which is also where M. Night Shyamalan comes from, he's pulling inspiration from, the Amish and Mennonite communities from Pennsylvania, especially those from Lancaster County. So he's using that as inspiration for how he depicts the twist ending that people didn't like at the time and felt it was a bit of a cop-out. But I find relatability there, just given the sense of place of where I'm also from. And I love the way he's tackling that. So, you know what? I'm almost tempted to put this in our collective number 2 just to see what people say. Because I think everything else around my reservations are that good. I really do think they're that good.
Yeah, I agree. And there's something, I don't know if it's like watching The Village this last week was the first time I had seen it.
Mm-hmm.
I think, anyway, since becoming a father. And I don't like my emotional evolution since 2013 has skyrocketed to a stratosphere I could have never really conceived. And that probably played a big part and also just general maturity. Like I said, 2004, I was 18 years old, 19 years old. I'm on the verge of 40 now.
Yeah.
And
this is 40.
Think about life differently.
Our version of Judd Apatow's This Is 40 is learning to love The Village.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And look, that ending just hits you differently.
Well, it's a great
context.
It's a romance movie. It really is.
Yeah.
And like you compare it to the works of, let's say, Nathaniel Hawthorne. It's a very folk horror film in many ways. Like I think I talked about this last week when Jay was on our show, how we talk about M. Night being someone that was a bit predictive with Unbreakable and the whole superhero movie craze. But The Village does have some similar vibes that we see with people like Robert Eggers and Ari Aster in a way. And on your rewatch, did you notice that maybe that film was maybe a little bit predictive in the more art house horror that we're getting nowadays? Because I think it does kind of have some of those qualities.
It does. I agree. I think what we get to now, some of what we get today certainly owes.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Bit to that.
So Village at number 2.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. The Village at number 2. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I think on a rewatch, I don't think you might not fully come around, but I think you'll be willing to forgive it more.
Well, the other things are just so good.
Exactly. It's
also
good.
It's also one of those M. Night films where, I mean, all of his films have awkward dialogue to some degree or another, but The Village actually has like a narrative purpose behind it because it's all a facade and it's all based on fake research and fake history. So like the like that actually adds a justification and a trauma to that.
Yes.
So yeah, I it's one of those movies where I think all of his things that people usually don't like about him come together in a way that works.
Exactly. Okay, right. Let's try to get through these next few quickly.
This will be this will be fast. Okay,
Lady in the Water. Along here.
Yeah, Lady in the Water at the bottom.
I do prefer it to The Happening though.
Oh, I do too. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. What I'm going to say is I'm putting it still above Wide Awake because even Lady in the Water, as much as I don't think it's a very good film, it has gotten more interesting for me as the years went on.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah,
that's another one I'd want to revisit.
Yeah,
kind of soon. I haven't seen that one in a while, but yeah.
But the Happening, I'm with you. That's bottom of the barrel right now, and it's a movie I want to like more. I want to have more fun with it. It's just like I just find the film dull. I really do, and that's not the best thing for it. That it goes back to the performances. I don't think it's the right actors to convey the silliness that movie's trying to go
100%,
for.
100%.
Yeah. if you were going
Now-
to say something about these other two, I think this
Well,
is where it gets a
I-
little dicey.
Well, again, I'm not necessarily going to champion this. I will just say, of these four, these middle four that are considered his worst, my favorite of them is The Last Airbender. Now, part of that is some of the lore and the mythology that is conveyed here visually, I do think is interesting at times. And you could argue, I don't think this is the case because I would still take The Village. But James Newton Howard's score to this film is among
good.
his best work.
It's too good.
It's too good for this movie. Like, it is so great.
It's why I mean, Lady in the Water, I don't hate. I'd like to keep that above the other three, but these other three, I really don't care what we put them. Honestly, they're all kind of battling similar ground here, but I'm not opposed to putting The Last Airbender above The Happening. It's simply because it has that
fine.
great score.
I think that's a compromise I'm willing to live with. Yeah, I just there's just certain elements to it. Again, individual things in a vacuum that collectively add up over time that I prefer to the other three. And at least until I revisit Lady in the Water, I think I could find myself in a similar camp as you. I don't think you'll find yourself liking Lady in the Water or anything like that, but I think you'll at least appreciate its weirdness and its bold swings. Yeah.
So I think anticipatorily I'll have it above these other three if you're okay with that.
Yeah, no, that's perfectly fine. But yeah, obviously The Last Airbender is terrible on the whole. Just things in a vacuum I like, especially the score and some of the visuals.
Yeah.
And then After Earth is just,
I want to put that at the very bottom. I like The Happening more than that because at least The Happening has some elements of M. Night that I can recognize. After Earth has so little of that.
Totally fair. Totally fair. Yeah, that's understandable.
Yeah. So I guess as a recap here, Signs, The Village, The Sixth Sense, Unbreakable, Lady in the Water, Last Airbender, The Happening, and then After Earth. Wide Awake, which I know you haven't seen, so I guess it's not really fair for us to consider it, but I probably have it maybe above The Last Airbender still, just because it at least feels like a movie.
Okay.
But
fair.
I mean, I don't. Yeah, that's that. Yeah, but I still have it below Lady in the Water.
Okay, fair enough. All right, so then that gets us to his resurgence era.
Yeah.
With The Visit in 2015, and yeah, I would put that. For me, I would put that right above Lady in the Water.
Yeah, I would too. I hated it when I first saw it, but I guess as I grow older, I grow more cynical, and I've come to appreciate that film's meanness. It's a very nihilistic movie that puts children in peril for laughs in a way that I just kind of appreciate now.
Yeah, I like it. Like I think it's handled very well.
Yeah, it's certainly not one of my favorites of his, but I think at this point in his ranking, putting it at number 5 of these 10, I think is fine.
Yeah, and a huge win for him as well, just to note real fast, because that film was made for $5 million, which was nothing. Like that is, even in 2015, that was pocket change. Yeah, but it grossed almost $100 million for Blumhouse. So
again, one of the most profitable films. Yeah.
If that film failed even to gross $5 million, we would have never heard of M. Night Shyamalan ever again. Yeah, probably.
Yep.
So huge. So it's worth noting. That was a nice little comeback for him.
Yeah.
Then we get to Split, which I would take that over The Visit on the whole.
I think it's a better movie. I wish I got the chance to rewatch Split in preparation for this episode we're doing right now. I wonder if my reservations at the time would still hold. Because I actually really liked that movie until its surprise ending that it's actually an Unbreakable film. I like the idea of it being a tie-in to this broader universe, but I didn't necessarily love that we got a literal explanation as to what was going on. I kind of like the more metaphorical depiction of trauma manifesting itself into some monstrous thing. I thought that was way more interesting.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm torn on this movie.
No, that's perfectly fair. And I feel the same as I did about The Village, I guess. At least in terms of that response. I understand. I don't disagree. Or at least I empathize with why someone would feel that way, but it doesn't bother me as much. I think it's very good. I think it's a very interesting, completely unexpected. And I think that's maybe why I give it a little bit of credit, because through most of the film, it works gloriously on its own terms. And James McAvoy is having the time of his life, and he's really going for it. A committed performance that I absolutely adore. And the connection to the Unbreakable universe is just something that you didn't really anticipate at all. And some of that is the trajectory of his career. He's trying to make a comeback here. And this is a way for him to come back in a really big way. And so, like similarly to, if someone told me they hated the ending to The Village, understandable. Same thing with Split. I get it. But I don't mind it. And it mostly works for me.
One thing I would have preferred about Split with regard to its ending is if it didn't treat its twist kind of like a post-credit scene. And because it comes after the title card.
It does feel that way a little bit. Yeah.
So when I saw the movie in the theater, I mean, I knew that there was some type of reveal that people didn't see coming. I didn't really know the extreme nature of it at that time. But when I saw the movie Split back in 2016, and I saw that moment after the title card in the diner where Bruce Willis's David Dunn shows up, I actually thought it was just an in-joke. I didn't know it was meant to be taken seriously, that this was, in fact, an Unbreakable sequel of sorts. And maybe that's why I find the ending to Split kind of deflating in a way, because I think in execution, it does. I didn't take it seriously at that time. And maybe just the construction of how it's interwoven in, I still have a hard time taking seriously.
Well, I will say, though, the one thing I really do like about the film or that ending sequence is that, or again, this twist, I should say specifically, is that it recontextualizes the film in a way that makes the film on the whole better. Because there are elements of the climax in terms of physicality and horror that I think are misguided and a little obtuse without that recontextualization.
Yeah,
like it just doesn't make sense.
I think that's where we differ. I didn't need an explanation to any of that.
Well, I think I do, because it's a different movie. Like, there's nothing about the McAvoy character that would make you think he was capable of those things without that reveal. And it just takes it to a completely different movie.
Yeah, it makes it literal, and I like that he was able to do those things as a metaphorical exercise as opposed to a literal exercise. I guess that was the thing I latched on to, if that makes sense. But again, I need to revisit the film because I've really only seen it maybe only 1.5 times, if I'm being honest. I've seen it that time when it first came out in 2016, and I passively revisited it when it was maybe on cable at some point. But I need to revisit the film in totality to see if anything the film is doing as it relates to its themes on trauma and abuse are more insightful than I might be giving it credit for. And I'm curious about that.
Yeah. I guess I just never saw the film acting metaphorically even throughout most of the film. So like even as a metaphorical exercise, I still think it would have been a little misguided. Like I don't think it would have worked. Because it just becomes a completely different movie. If you're acting in that vein through most of the film, sure. Be as ostentatious as you want. But the moment you completely switch gears to a completely different movie, you lose me. And it just felt manufactured until it recontextualizes. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, well now I understand the film's themes more and the physicality makes sense.
Okay.
So I think it completely fixed itself as far as
Okay.
I'm concerned.
Okay. Yeah. I need to see the film again to see if I can
Yeah.
fall into that trap. I'm not sure if I'm quite there yet. But I do think it is an overall very solid movie. And I'm with you as far as this ranking is concerned. Putting it above The Visit, I think it's just a better crafted film and certainly a more interesting one.
Well, where you and I are going to fight here is I don't love Glass.
Glass
You
is
like
better than
Glass
Split.
way
Glass is
more
better than Split.
Yeah, I wholly disagree.
It's so interesting. It is one of the most interesting movies I've ever seen in the past 10 years.
Yeah, it might be interesting, but I don't think that makes it good either.
That saves it for me. That saves any blemishes it has. And it has so many blemishes, but man, that is such an interesting movie.
Yeah, it's all kinds of messy. And look, I don't disagree that it's interesting. There are some compelling elements to it, but I think it is extremely artificial and
I love what it has to
just
say.
not good.
I love what it has to say, especially in the context of the modern superhero lens. It basically allows this trilogy to come full circle as a trilogy that predated the superhero movie craze, and then that kind of crystallizes as it's starting to implode on itself by depicting a group of people trying to hide superheroes from the general public because they see them as a danger. like in a way that we talk about superhero movies now becoming a danger to Hollywood. I love the whole meta circular arc of the trilogy. And again, yeah, I'm with you as far as a movie. Split is a better movie, but I want to talk about and revisit Glass way more often than I do Split. I guess it really depends on our criteria here. Is Split the better movie? Yes, maybe we should put it above Glass. Is Glass the more interesting movie in M. Night's filmography that has more to suggest about what he would do later? I would say yes. So it's I don't know. Do we come back to it later and see how the rest of this all fares?
I mean, maybe. I just don't see the film in that same way. I don't think its ideas are, like I said, it all feels a little artificial to me. I think he's aiming for something beyond what he's able to, at least in that film, execute. I'm not saying that he's certainly a smart filmmaker and he's a great filmmaker. I think his heart was in the right place, but that film, while interesting, I think in execution is it's muffled by doing too many things simultaneously.
Okay,
and
so
it's not able to balance its characters very well.
So can we compromise a little bit here then? So our ranking right now is Signs, The Village, The Sixth Sense, Unbreakable, Split, and then The Visit. I assume you would still put Glass below The Visit, right? Personally.
Yes, personally, yeah.
Would you be able to compromise if we put it in between Split and The Visit then? Still keep Split up. Okay. I'll allow that. I'll at least allow that. Fine. So we can at least find some middle ground there because I can at least acknowledge Split is a smoother movie. Glass might be the roughest movie by comparison that M. Night has probably ever made. It's something I like about it, but I can't sit here and say it's a better movie than Split. So I guess I can compromise a little bit there.
Yeah. I mean, there are elements I still like about Glass. I love the performances as well. I just wish that it was able to be more cohesive with its ideas. That's really what that film comes down to for me.
Maybe this is a nice transition into a movie like Old, because everything I talked about with Glass and what I like about that film was arguably smoother in execution in a movie like Old, right?
Yes. Yeah, I would agree there.
Yeah.
And Old is maybe like I feel about Old the way you do about Glass, I guess. Because I do recognize some of the narrative traps, pun intended, of Old. It is
nice word.
Thank you. It is a little uneven. I think there's elements of the narrative that's a bit rushed. The ending is all kinds of a mess. But there's something about it that I just find extremely compelling, especially when you couple it with the cinematography and the camera work, the performances, the tension of that film. I mean, the genre thrills of Old, I think, are excellent. Like as an experience, I think it has a lot to offer. that I just really have come to love.
I mean, it's no coincidence that the movie Old depicts at one point symbolically kids playing in the sand and eventually adults playing in the sand, because this movie is M. Night Shyamalan playing in a sandbox and the camera is his toy. He's doing all kinds of weird crap with the camera that I've come to really appreciate this movie more as time has gone on.
Oh, yeah.
So in this collective ranking, so just to recap, Signs, The Village, The Sixth Sense, Unbreakable, and Split. Those are our top 5 right now. I kind of want to put Old at number 5.
It's number 5 on my personal ranking.
So, okay. Let's do that.
So, yeah. That's fine with me. Yeah. I mean, I really like Old a lot. So, I don't think it'll ever, I think because of those narrative issues, I don't know if it'll ever crack the top 4 for me. And even though on my personal ranking I have The Sixth Sense at number 6 again, I do think that is a better movie than Old.
Yeah.
But I love the ambition of Old. There's something about that artistic vigor and the camera work that I tend to really love subjectively, which is why I ranked it higher than the Sixth Sense. If I was doing it like a more objective ranking, the Sixth Sense would probably be at number 3 on my list.
Gotcha.
But when you're looking at this subjectively as well as objectively, I guess, you tend to shift things around a little bit.
You tend to maneuver a few things. Yeah. And I know the next film that M. Night would direct, Knock at the Cabin, is one of those movies for me. That's a movie and I think I said this last year, JD, when we reviewed it. The film came out only a little over a year ago, if I'm not mistaken. I know it was 2023. I even said at that time, I think that movie is going to grow for me. And it has been growing for me because even at that time, coming off the heels of something like Old, I was so entranced by what M. Night was doing with the camera in that film that to see a movie like Knock at the Cabin feel so much more restrained by comparison, I wasn't sure what to make of that.
Yeah.
But I'm starting to come around on that film's bleakness. That's one of the bleakest films that I think M. Night has made. I forget which critic. Actually, I think I remember. It was Matt Zoller Seitz on Twitter. I think said Knock at the Cabin feels like this hybrid of Rod Sterling's Twilight Zone with a Roman Polanski film, and it weirdly opened up my eyes even further on the film because there are elements of Knock at the Cabin that feel very reminiscent of 1960s Polanski. Movies like Repulsion and Cul-de-sac. Even to some degree, Rosemary's Baby, and that adds this edge to the film that it's weirdly more artful than I think some people are giving it credit for. That is a very, very good movie.
Yeah, I love Knock at the Cabin. I have this at number 4 on my personal list. I think it is really great. I think a lot of it comes down to the performances. I think are very good. Very committed. I love the artistry of this film as well. I think it also works for me for how subversive it is. This isn't a film that I would consider to have a patented M. Night reveal or twist. There certainly is one at the end of the film, but I don't think it's nearly as striking or extreme as we've seen with him before, especially regarding the film's ideas on religious fanaticism. What he does with that film to give credence to that fanaticism is different than any other film I've seen on the matter. And I know, I haven't read the novel that it's based on. I heard it plays out very differently in the book.
Yeah.
But what he does here, I think is incredible, especially when you look at Christian theology. And maybe some of it is I never expected M. Night to comment on that, but that's what he does with this film. And it gets to the text, the biblical text, unconditional love. innocence, creating a path forward for hope. There's something about that in this film where its central couple is a gay couple. I think is provocative. Like it's really fascinating how the film kind of toys with those ideas.
It's so provocative, even in ways that I'm not even sure were intentional. Because I do read
it might not have been. I don't know.
I do read the film in a similar way that you do, as far as this interesting irony that the thing that most religious fanatics frown on these days is the thing that liberates them in this movie.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That said, and I have seen some critics feel somewhat offended by Knock at the Cabin, given the fact that it ends in one of these two individuals needing to be killed in order for that liberation to happen. So some people have seen it as a justification for what these fanatics believe in. So in a way, like you get some, if you get similar religious fanatics that might believe the things that these four horsemen, pun intended, are doing, they might see the movie in that way and actually like the movie because of that. And then you might get people like us that see it more as a liberation for everyone else, as more of a hopeful message in a way. And I don't know if that was M. Night's intent to also not alienate the people he might technically be alienating. That's actually a really dangerous thing he's portraying here in this way. And that's what's made me really appreciate this movie in the long run.
And also some of it could be, not to get too political or however you want to describe the current landscape we're in.
Yeah.
But when it's in front of you every single day, you can't help but see the ironies.
Yeah.
Regarding religious fanaticism and how that plays out politically. But when you consider Christianity and how salvation is rooted in the purity of Jesus, again, according to the text, his unconditional love, symbolically, that is represented in this film through a gay couple whose love for each other is just as pure and innocent.
Yeah.
And that is wholly contradictory to Christian fundamentalism. And to see M. Night comment on that in this blissful, hopeful way, I never saw that. Like, that's the twist. That's the twist of the film, is I never saw that happening.
This is a movie I think gets better knowing that the apocalyptic backdrop is in fact real. Because I think that was what people were latching onto before seeing it, was the what if of it all. But M. Night's always more interested in how the what leads into the why. And the why here in Knock at the Cabin is so fascinating. Like I said, I don't know if he's also trying to look at the other side of that argument that you're looking at, given the fact that this gay couple, this marriage, technically had to end in order to find that liberation, that sense of love and innocence that you're talking about. There's a weird contradiction happening there, but I find the movie more interesting because of that. It's like I can't explain it.
That's the crazy thing is that's what parallels the religious text, though.
That's
because
right.
Jesus had to die.
Yeah. That's
the love and forgiveness and redemption is born out of that sacrifice. And who represents that in this film? Yeah, it's not what Christian fundamentalists would approve of. Let's just put it that way. That's fascinating. Like, that is utterly fascinating to me.
In this ranking, I would put this probably at number 5, just below Signs, The Village, The Sixth Sense, and Unbreakable.
Yeah, like just above Old.
Just above Old, yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm fine with that. Yeah, like I said, I have it at number 4 on my list, but I won't deny that The Sixth Sense is a better movie. Like I said, objectively, it's probably 2 or 3.
I think
I love Knock at the Cabin so much.
I think this is a bolder movie, Knock at the Cabin. And I think it may have a bit more of a restrained feel in its direction when compared to something like Old, but I think that efficiency allows those themes to be the bold and daring thing that M. Night wants to portray. Like, it certainly feels like the movie he's working towards in this new era. And, you know, you talk about the performances. I think this is probably certainly among his best collectively performed movies ever made. It's up there with The Sixth Sense as far as there's really every M. Night film has at least one performance that doesn't really work. It doesn't quite work. I don't think there's one in Knock at the Cabin that doesn't work. I think they all work.
They're all great. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like Rupert Grint, seeing him again. Awesome. Dave Bautista
he's one of the he
so
is
good.
one he is one of M. Night's most fascinating characters, especially given the potential backstory of that character and how he may have been involved in this gay couple in some way in the past. Like, and I love that I love that the film kind of clouds that judgment a little bit. It doesn't give a full answer to that, so that creates like this bias. Yeah, what an interesting movie! An interesting
movie. Absolutely. So that's all of them, right? That's all of them.
We don't want to rank Trap just yet.
I guess that's what I was going to ask. Do we want to include Trap in here? Obviously, we haven't reviewed it. We're going to do that soon, but do we want to include Trap in this? We can. We've seen it.
I'm okay with it. Like, maybe it'll spark people to have an interest in hearing what we have to say about the film. So I'll tell you. Okay, so let's first recap from number 1 to number 14 here.
Yeah.
Signs, The Village, The Sixth Sense, Unbreakable, Knock at the Cabin, Old, Split, Glass, The Visit, Lady in the Water, Wide Awake, Last Airbender, The Happening, and then After Earth. That's our ranking as it is.
Yeah.
Within that ranking, I would put Trap at number 6, just above Old but below Knock at the Cabin.
That's exactly what I was thinking. Yeah.
Okay. Well, then that was easy.
Yeah.
So,
that didn't take a whole lot of debate. Yeah.
So for everyone listening, while at the time of releasing this, we don't have a review of Trap just yet, it'll be coming very soon. Just know we really like the movie.
Yep. We're going to be positive on it.
Yeah.
I know it's been polarized, but we're going to be a little positive on it for sure. Yeah, I look forward to talking about it. I really love M. Night. And the thing is, like, all of the movies up until those bottom 4, I quite like in one way or another. And especially that top 6, just really good stuff. Really, really
he's one of my favorite filmmakers really right now. I never thought I'd say that, but no one's making movies like him anymore. And I appreciate that.
And that's the thing. Other than his foray into his trilogy with Split and then with Glass, and to be fair to him, he needed that at the time.
Yeah, he did.
He really needed some big wins. But this is a guy that's got some interesting premises, some ideas. He's not afraid to be very movie-ish. And he's not reliant on IP, and he's not going to be doing Avengers 6. Let's just put it that way. Like, he's making his own movies, and I can't help but love that.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. That was a lot of fun. So that's our ranking of M. Night Shyamalan. Let us know if you agree or disagree with our ranking. You can leave a comment below. If you're watching on YouTube, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, reach out to us on social media. You can email us InSessionFilm@gmail.com as well.
Yeah.
I think that'll do it for this week's show, unless there's anything else you have to add here, Brendan. But
I don't think so. I think that certainly covers it. M. Night, good man. Good man. He seems like a man I want to talk to. He just seems like a really genuinely sweet individual.
Yeah. Absolutely. Want to quickly plug this week's Women in Session, where the ladies got together to talk about the documentary on Hulu, I believe it is, Brats.
The Brat Pack.
Have you seen that? Yeah,
I
the
have
Brat
not.
Pack documentary?
I have not, but I've heard interesting things about it that make me, I don't want to say reserved about it, but
I've heard mixed things.
Yeah, just given like the whole I guess, agenda on how it was made and who made it and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Like I'm curious, but not really optimistic.
Yeah.
I'll simply say.
It seems as if Andrew McCarthy is having his own pity party with the documentary, is what it seems like.
It does. Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't want to say it in that direct way, but yeah, I don't disagree.
Yeah. And of course, the ladies do talk about it. It's actually a really fascinating conversation. It was one of those edits where I'm editing the show, and at a certain point, I just found myself not editing and just listening to the show.
That's a sign of a good podcast.
Yeah, because the conversation is just really great. So I definitely urge people to go and check that out. We had a Chasing the Gold episode from last week as well. Brian Suspielas joined Shadon to talk about the Venice Film Festival and TIFF. They did a little bit of a preview, so I want to plug that as well. There will be a new Chasing the Gold this week as well.
Yeah.
Can't recall off the cuff what that one is going to be, but that will be out this Friday, so you can be on the lookout for that. We will have reviews. We'll have podcast reviews of Trap, as well as the Vera Drew film, The People's Joker, which has been on our radar all year. It came out earlier in the year.
Yeah, we couldn't find
it. It actually premiered rather at TIFF in 2022. But
That's insane.
As one could imagine with the title, The People's Joker, and if you've seen any of the imagery, you'll know this all the more. There were some legal issues that they had to go through in order to get this film released. We'll talk about it. I really don't know how they got around this.
The lore of making this movie is going to give it some staying power, I think.
Yeah,
not even just its subject matter. I think the lore is going to be the thing.
Yeah, so I look forward to talking about The People's Joker as well. There's going to be a lot of interesting elements to it to talk about.
Yeah, for sure.
So we'll have a review for that out this week as well. So it's going to be another busy week on the podcast.
For sure.
Of course, tons of great written content over at InSessionFilm.com as well. Brendan, any final thoughts before we get out of here for this week's show?
Yeah, I don't think so. I do want to at least acknowledge the recent news around David Lynch, and he said due to his health that he will not be directing in person anymore. And it's certainly sad to see, especially thinking of the fact that maybe the last time we'll ever actually hear or see of him on a movie set is his cameo in The Fabelmans. But one of our favorite
way to go out, though.
That's a great way to go out, and obviously, we don't have devastating news to share or anything like that as far as what this could have led to. But I mean, of course, we hope he has any type of speedy recovery, that he needs to feel better. And obviously we'd love to see him keep working in whatever capacity that is, but obviously his health comes first, and we hope he's okay.
Yeah, definitely hope he's okay. It is sad that he's never going to get to direct, at least on a film set. Hopefully he'll be able to do something, however that looks. I don't know how you can direct a movie from home, but if anyone can figure it out, it's certainly him.
It's him. He'll find a way to make it part of the story.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Either way, I hope that he's able to stay healthy and live his life. And, it's all about, especially at that age, just comfortability, quality of life matters. And as much as I would love to see more from him artistically, and I'm sure we will, I just hope that, he's able to have a comfortable, good quality of life for the rest of his days. So
I'm with you.
Hope he's okay. But that was some saddening news to hear earlier this year. But hopefully he's able to do something out of it. Who knows?
Yeah, same.
We shall see. With all of that said, again, thanks everybody for listening. I just want to note quickly to our Patreon subscribers, our VIP listeners, we do plan on getting something to you guys soon. I know it's been a few weeks. It's just been busy summertime. I just went on vacation. Yeah. Brennan's about to go on vacation. We've been doing a lot of prep for this retrospective, so forgive us. Yeah. But it is something that is on our radar. So if you're a patron, a YouTube member, Apple Podcast subscriber, we do plan on getting something to you soon.
Yeah, absolutely.
So just be on the lookout for that as well. With all of that said, thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on the InSession Film Podcast. M. Night Shyamalan rules.
Absolutely.